Hi, everybody. So like Nate mentioned, my name's Alex Martinez. I'm a web designer and developer at an agency called White Label that's here in Toledo. I'm a designer and I'm a developer, but one of my other great passions, things that I love, are flags. You may recognize this flag. This is the flag of our neighbors to the north, Canada. It's an amazing flag in terms of flag design. And what I'm going to be talking about tonight is the study of flag design, also known as vexillology. You may have never heard that term. I never had until I started looking into flags and getting more interested in them. I'm going to be walking all of us through the principles of flag design, 5 basic principles, and explain why flags are so important and why you should care about them. Even though they seem like a frivolous thing, I personally believe that they really are not, and they have a lot of good and value to them. So whenever I bring up flags, kind of off of that point, a lot of the reaction that I get is, well, I just don't care about flags. I just don't. I never think about flags. And I'm guessing a lot of you probably never have really given flags a second thought. But when it comes down to it, I can guarantee you that 100% of people care about flags. And it's why you see flags all over the place, especially here in the US. We love the American flag. We hang it at our houses. It's flying outside at different buildings. And my love for flags and flag design kind of started a couple years ago when I saw a TED Talk by Roman Mars. He is the host of a podcast called 99% Invisible, where they take a look at everyday design that kind of goes unnoticed. So if you've seen this TED Talk before, you'll probably see some similarities between my talk and his. If you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend you go check it out. It's on YouTube and TED.com or TED.org. It was when I saw this, and I was living in Washington, D.C., that I really started to notice flags. I'm originally from here in Toledo, grew up here, but went away for college for a couple of years and then ended up moving to Washington, D.C., where I worked as a web designer. And in D.C., I started noticing their city flag. This beauty, right there. If you ever visit DC, you're going to notice this flag. It's just about everywhere. And I started noticing it in my everyday life whenever I was going around from work back to home. You really see it everywhere. It's on street signs, it's on the license plates of the district, it's on garbage cans and recycling bins. And one of my favorite places to find it is actually at Eastern Market in DC. It's a weekend farmers market and craft market. You can see it here in the different pieces of art. I always really wanted to buy one, but they were always way too expensive, so I may make one for myself someday. So you can see that a flag like this, it really shows up in a lot of places. And people in DC are really passionate about their flag and their city. It's something that is a symbol that people care so much about that they'll get it tattooed on their body. So you can see here on the right, we have the flag of Washington, D.C., on the left, the flag of Maryland. So what is it about this flag that makes it such a great symbol? We're going to be taking a look at that in a little bit more detail. But real quick, just like a little side note about the D.C. flag, is that it comes from the coat of arms of the family of George Washington, connecting the flag back to the president that the city is named after. So what is it that makes a good flag? Well, we're going to take a look at those 5 basic principles of flag design and through examining another really great city flag, and that's the flag of the city of Chicago. If you've ever been to Chicago, much like DC, you may have seen this flag flying just about everywhere. It's another one of those really great flag designs that people really adopt and transform into a whole bunch of different things, from stickers to patches to decals on cars to coffee mugs. So what is it that makes it so great? Well, according to the North American Vexillological Association, or NAVA for short, the first principle that we're going to be talking about is keep it simple. The design of a flag should be so simple that a child can draw it from memory. So you can see with both the DC flag and the Chicago flag, this is something that you could easily reproduce. Now that I've shown it to you, if I gave you a blue colored pencil and a red colored pencil, or even a whole array of pencils, and I asked you to draw this back for me, you probably could. There are 2 blue bars and 4 red 6-pointed stars. Simple enough and to remember and really easy to recognize. The second principle of flag design is that a flag should use meaningful symbolism. In the case of Chicago, what we have here is two blue bars representing the two major water resources that they have right in Chicago, the river and Lake Michigan, while the four six-pointed stars in the middle represent different historical events in the history of Chicago. The first one being the Fort Dearborn being founded, which was the first settlement of Chicago. The second being the Great Chicago Fire of 1871, you may have heard of that. The third being the Columbia Exposition of 1893, or also commonly referred to as the World's Fair. And the Century of Progress Expo, which was lesser known, not very successful, but in 1933-34. This sort of symbolism really helps connect this flag to the city of Chicago, making it a lot more connected to the people and the culture of the city. So that's two principles down so far. Keep it simple and use meaningful symbolism. The third principle is to use 2 to 3 basic colors. So again, here with Chicago, we have blue, red, and white. And there are two reasons for this. One, to make it really easy to reproduce and remember. And also, when you're actually creating a physical flag, it's a lot easier to do a limited set of colors. So if you're actually making the fabric and printing it out in mass production, it makes it a lot easier to actually reproduce. According to the North American Vexillological Association, when they did a survey in 2004, they rated the Chicago flag the #1 US city flag in America. DC was actually #2. And it's so tied to the city, people care about it so much that it's actually really common for police officers and firefighters that died to actually have the Chicago flag draped on their coffin rather than the US flag. There's that connection. People care so much about it and it's so ingrained in their community. All right, so that's 3 principles down. The fourth principle is the one that irks me probably the most out of any of these. And that is to never use any writing of any kind, whether that be types, just like written text, or a city seal, like that. So a lot of countries do a really good job at adhering to these first 3 principles and this fourth one of not using any text. So if you look at the American flag, for instance, there's no writing on it, but we know it's the United States. A couple other great designs, you may have seen these and you may recognize these and know which countries they belong to, but none of them use any text or any seals. Here we have South Africa, Turkey, Israel, Somalia, Gambia, and Japan, just to name a few. When you look at country flags, a lot of the time, the majority of the time, they adhere to these principles mainly because of the importance that they serve. They're one of the first entry points to a country at the international level, so they need to be recognizable. But many, many, many American cities, and states for that matter, break these principles. Here's a smattering of examples of some of the city flags here in the US. Fun fact, this is New York City. They have a seal too. Many people may think that good design comes down to good taste, but a lot of the time it doesn't. If we take a look at these principles and apply them to flags like these, if we were to redesign them, adhering to something like keeping it simple, using meaningful symbolism, using only 2 to 3 basic colors and not using any written text, you could vastly improve these right away just adhering to those. Just to kind of recap what we've learned so far, here we have those 4 basic principles and the 5th, which is be distinctive. This one is kind of self-explanatory. You don't want your flag to look exactly like somebody else's flag because then it won't represent where you're from or your community or your group or your team. And if you show principles like this to any sort of designer, whether it's a web designer like myself or a graphic designer, an architect, an interior designer, they would all agree with you that these 5 basic principles will apply to their own craft. It's something that we can all agree upon, and using a set of principles like this can vastly improve any sort of design. But again, the biggest problem with American city flags, including our Toledo city flag, seems to be that we cannot stop putting lettering or seals on our flags. These are what vexillologists call SOBs, or seals on a bed sheet. And if you can't tell which city they go to, that's exactly why they aren't all that great. So there are a couple of issues here real quick. You can see that a lot of these flags use too many colors. They don't keep it simple. They all look very similar, and you can't really tell where they're from, except for maybe the city of Anaheim, because they seem to fix that by just putting it in the biggest text you could find right at the top. Now the issue with seals is mainly that, well, there are a couple of issues, but if you are to have a flag flying up on a flagpole 150 feet away, you're not going to be able to read any of this text on these little seals. A European equivalent, if you are to think about seals, if you love seals and you love the city seal, if you were to think of it as a European city, for instance, the equivalent to that would be the city coat of arms. So this is the coat of arms of Amsterdam in the Netherlands. And you can see that it's really intricately illustrated. They have their city's motto, and it's a really beautiful coat of arms. Something like a coat of arms and a seal can be used when appropriate. They were meant to be used on printed materials where you have the piece of paper like right in front of your face and you can read and see all of the little detail and illustration. But the issue on a flag, again, is you can't decipher that from a distance. Say we were designing the city flag of Amsterdam and we're a US city. What we would have probably done is take this coat of arms and do something like this. We would probably just take our coat of arms, put it on a sheet, put the name of our city, and call it a day. But there are so many different avenues that we can take when it comes to flag design. And for instance, Amsterdam, what they ended up doing was take some of the design elements in their coat of arms from their past, their history, and connected it to the city itself. And they made one of the most badass flags in the world. Yeah, so this is the flag of Amsterdam. You'll see it flying everywhere if you ever visit. They have it on patches, they'll wear it on backpacks, stickers, bumper stickers, whatever. You can see that it's a lot simpler than the coat of arms, but they take some of the design elements from the shield right in the middle and just apply it to their flag. It's really recognizable, it's easy to remember, it's easy to reproduce from memory, and it adheres to all the basic principles of flag design. If you ever want to design your own flag, one of the best ways to start is by drawing out a very small flag at about 1 inch by 1.5 inches. And you can see here's Chicago, here's DC. If your design can stand up at a size that small, then you're definitely on the right path, because 1 inch by 1.5 inches rectangle on a piece of paper about 15 inches from your face is going to be what a flag looks like when it's flying 150 feet away, just flapping in the breeze. So back to those 5 principles. Keep it simple, meaningful symbolisms, use 2 to 3 basic colors, no lettering or seals, and be distinctive. So now all of you here are some of the leading vexillologists in the state of Ohio, definitely in Toledo. And what we're going to do is take these principles that we've learned and apply them to the Toledo city flag. When I moved away to college in DC, I never seen this flag in person flying anywhere. I hadn't come downtown too often, and even when you are downtown, this flag is flown at a couple public governmental buildings. I know Owens Corning flies it in front of their headquarters down here. But you don't see your neighbors ever flying this flag. And if there's anybody here that has had a neighbor or you've flown this at your house yourself, I would love to hear from you. I don't think anybody has. The current city flag was adopted in 1994, believe it or not very long ago. It was adopted in 94 in preparation for the 160th anniversary of our city in 1997. But before the 94 flag, this was the original Toledo flag. This flag was adopted by the city in 1909, and basically from the research that I found, this little red building in the middle represents Fort Industry, or the first settlement of Toledo. It kind of looks like a Monopoly house whenever I look at it. Then the circle around it, this blue ring, according to the adoption in 1909, represents unity and also harkens back to the state of Ohio, thus the O. But beyond that, this flag, I mean, it looks a lot like a lot of the other seals on bed sheets that we saw before, with a circular graphic in the middle and some bars on the sides. It wasn't terrible, but it got a whole lot worse in '94. They did away with the seal, they did away with the block house and the O and opted to have the seal on the flag. So this flag was adopted, from what I could find, just by a city council vote in preparation for that 160th anniversary. And they definitely took a little bit of the character away. Like, this isn't a great flag, but this is a worse flag. In my whole talk and this whole idea of examining our own flag and kind of reconsidering what the Toledo flag could be, it's definitely not the worst, and I want to make it very clear that it's not the worst flag in America. According to the survey in 2004 by NAVA, this flag was rated number 94 out of 130 flags. So the bottom 25% or so. It's not the worst. If you want to see the worst flag in America, this was rated the worst flag in the United States. This is the flag of Pocatello, Idaho. They trademarked it, they copyrighted it, and it looks like they put it together in Microsoft Word with some like word art and some grainy clip art of some mountains. So we're not this bad. This flag is not that bad. But this flag could definitely use a lot of improvement. So again, let's take a look at this flag through those 5 principles that we've kind of examined. It breaks all of the principles. It doesn't keep it simple. This isn't a design that could be reproduced by a child. You would never have a kid able, I mean, I can't even do this, regurgitate the Latin phrase of our city, have all of that text, illustrate a whole fort and sunrise. It does have some meaningful symbolism in the fact that it still does represent one of the early settlements of Toledo. But if you think about it, a lot of cities here in the United States were settled. That's kind of what happened. There were lots of forts, and it's not very different from a lot of other places. 2 to 3 basic colors. It used to do that when it was just red, white, and blue, but adding the seal has added, I think there are up to like 6 colors on this flag right now. No lettering or seals, very self-evident. And it's not distinctive. It's just like all those other American city flags with the seal on it. What I'm going to show next is just like a really basic idea of how we could apply these principles and create a better flag. And I want to preface this with the fact that I don't think that what I show next should be the city flag. And I'll get into that a little bit more in a moment. So if we were to really quickly redesign this, what I would do probably is start by taking some of the basic elements. We still have the 2 blue bars, but we can widen that center area to bring more emphasis to whatever we place here. We kind of go back to that original, the original flag in the O shape, but make it larger, make it a more predominant feature. And then based off of that original flag, you could simplify that drawing of the fort and make it something that you could reproduce more easily from memory. So do something like, I don't know, put a pentagon to represent like a little house. So something like this already exceeds what we currently have, though I don't think that this is the perfect solution, and I definitely would not want to say that it is. So you may be thinking, what can we do as a city when it comes to rethinking a flag, and why should we even bother? Ever since that TED Talk that I referenced at the beginning came about, that was 2015, it's been a couple of years, a lot of other cities have kind of examined their flag and their symbol for their community and worked on redesigning it. So probably the effort that I've followed most closely that I think's done a really great job is Milwaukee, Wisconsin. In the TED Talk, Roman Mars picks out Milwaukee as one of the worst flags. Their flag was worse than any of our past flags. So they definitely needed this effort. This was the flag of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Yeah. So now that you know all these basic principles, you can see how something like this can break them real fast. When this flag was adopted, what the city did was they held a citywide submission contest. And what ended up happening was one of their alder people They don't have a city council, they have aldermen and women. Took different elements from all of the different submissions and threw them all together into this kitchen sink of a flag. So you can see that they have some wheat to symbolize their brewing industry. They have the founding date, they have the name of the city, so you definitely can't miss it. And then they have like the skyline, baseball field, a ship for their shipping industry. But there's so much going on here that it just, when you see this flying, you're not going to be able to tell what it is. Just to point out what's a fun fact about this flag. So there are flags on this flag. So this was the battle flag of Milwaukee. You can see it right there. They actually have a US flag flying on top of this building on their flag, and then like a cartoony flag with the M for Milwaukee. This is a hot mess. This was bad. And what ended up happening was a graphic designer in Milwaukee named Steve Kotis started this People's Flag of Milwaukee design initiative. He wanted to make it an inclusive, community-led effort to redesign the Milwaukee city flag. And what they did was, first they held design workshops, much like this talk right here, you're kind of in one right now, where they helped educate the citizens of Milwaukee about what makes a good flag. They went to different schools and libraries and community events and helped educate people in flag design. And then what they did next was source those public submissions from all those people that they reached out to. So what they ended up doing was getting over 1,000 flag design submissions. And then they put together a panel of 5 people, including Steve Kotis, who you can see here, the guy that started this, comprised of their city historian, other design professionals, other city representatives, to narrow down those 1,000 entries to a top 50 and then a final 5. So they narrowed it down to these final 5, actually made prototype flags and put them on display at their city hall so that everybody could come see what they would look like if they were to be produced as the actual city flag. And what came of this was they ended up allowing for a public rating online where people could go and rate each flag on a scale of 1 to 10 to pick the best flag out of these final 5. And what they ended up picking was a flag called Sunrise Over the Lake. This one. So you can see how something like this adheres to all those 5 principles that we talked about before. It's really simple. You could draw it from memory. It only uses a couple of colors, so it's really reproducible and recognizable. And it represents where the city that it's from, being the sunrise over Lake Michigan, and using colors like yellow to represent their wheat and brewing history. And what's really cool about a flag like this and a design like this is that way that it's repurposed and incorporated into the community, how people take a symbol like this and make it their own. So I follow the Milwaukee Flag Project on Instagram, so I see a lot of this content all the time. After they chose this flag, the citizens of Milwaukee really started adopting it as their own. You can see how something like this can be repurposed on t-shirts, on pins, on sports uniforms, on bicycles, and how people are proud of something that looks so good and fly it at their houses or fly it at public spaces. And again, like often when city leaders hear about an idea like this, they think, why should we spend all this time and all this effort to just redesign a flag? And the thing is, when you have a really nicely designed flag that people care about and can identify with and make that connection between the flag and where they're from, it gives them a banner to rally behind to face bigger issues that are going on in the community. So it's kind of a vehicle to both brand a city, brand a place, bring people together, and get them talking. A couple of other examples of recent flag designs. The city of Tulsa, Oklahoma, they went through a very similar effort, and this was their original flag. So it's kind of a seal. It kind of has some graphic elements and some text. And what they ended up doing was deciding on this flag. You can see how they use some elements. Like when I see this, I see like a dream catcher, which kind of connects the plains and the Native Americans in the plains and the Midwest back to their city. We took a look at this flag before, and I'm very happy to say that it's been reconciled. But The city of Pocatello, Idaho took some steps after they were called out in this TED Talk. They actually invited Roman Mars, the guy that did the talk, to their city to meet with their city officials to kind of get them on the right step to redesigning their city flag. And their initiative ended up producing this. I mean, it's a lot better. It definitely harkens back to the original with the mountains, but creates a design that adheres to those flag design principles and makes a whole lot better flag. I hope that now that you look at our city flag, you can see it's definitely not the worst. It's definitely not the best, but there's a lot of opportunity here for us to do something about it. Especially with all the development that's going on downtown and around the Toledo region, I feel like there is a lot of momentum here for us to do something great. Especially having been gone for I was gone about 6.5 years and moved back about 1.5 years ago. It does seem like a really different city from when I left. And I'm really hoping that we have an opportunity to do something great together and make Toledo better. I hope you all know a little bit more about flag design, and I hope you care about flags a little bit more than you did when you came in, and see how they can be so awesome and so important to a community. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to take them. Thank you so much for coming out. If you do want to contact me or are interested in being a part of an effort to redesign the city flag, you can reach out at toledoflagdesign@gmail.com. I've been kind of working on this idea of doing a design initiative, and I have the support of a couple of key people at my company, White Label. We're in the very beginning stages where we're starting to reach out to city officials, city council members, the mayor's office, see what it would actually take to legally do something and get it officially adopted. But we kind of want to follow the model of that Milwaukee project and definitely create inclusive and community-led design effort in creating a really great symbol for our city. Thank you all for coming out, and yeah, I appreciate your time.